In Level 1 versus Level 100 Deathworlder, the ultimate confrontation explodes as Alex Carter faces champion Zoran Zark in the acid-filled caverns. Outmatched, but desperate, Alex uses quick thinking over brute strength, luring the overconfident Level 100 to the edge of an acid pool. With one final, desperate shove, the rookie sends the seemingly invincible champion plunging to a horrifying, dissolving death. The holographic display flickered with the intensity of a supernova across the vast theater of the Apex Arena. Billions of eyes throughout the galaxy fixed on the countdown timer as it ticked down to 0. The moment had arrived. Deathworld Games. Season 3 was about to begin. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings of all taxonomic categories. The AI host's voice boomed across the interstellar broadcast network. I'm Jimmy V, 31.2, and I welcome you to the most anticipated survival competition in the known universe. The camera panned across the audience chambers, capturing the diverse spectators. The golden-skinned Eve, slick-bodied Zor, furry Cathara, and humans from Earth, all united by their fascination with watching the ultimate test of survival. Today, 100 individuals from 100 species will face the ultimate challenge. Jimmy continued, his holographic form expanding to reveal the planet below. Welcome to Episode 3, The Swamp Doom, Our Arena, Greenmire 7, a planet of endless marshlands, acid storms, and predators lurking in every shadow. The screen split to showcase contestant profiles, lingering particularly on two figures. Our returning champion, Zoran Zadran Zark of the Zor, 3-time winner, Level 100 Deathworlder, trained since birth to survive the harshest environments. The audience erupted in cheers as Zoran's stoic face filled the screen. His scaled skin glistened under the arena lights, eyes cold and calculating. He didn't acknowledge the applause, merely nodding once before returning to his preparation. And our wildcard entry, Jimmy announced with dramatic pause. Representing Earth, Alex Carter, Level 1 Deathworlder. The camera zoomed in on a human male in his late 20s, tension evident in his jaw as he adjusted his survival pack. Unlike the confident postures of the other contestants, Alex's shoulders betrayed his anxiety. A rookie with only 2 minor survival games under his belt, he was the clear underdog. At the Earth Research Outpost E7, 3 commentators watched the introduction with varying degrees of skepticism. A Level 1 against Zoran? Hailey of the Eve laughed, her golden skin catching the light. The human won't last 3 days. I'll give him 5, Lodaro countered, his slick Zor skin rippling with amusement. Humans are stubborn, if nothing else. Either way, Imid the Cathara analyst added while adjusting her fur, it'll make for excellent ratings. Back on the preparation deck, Alex stared at the planet through the view screen. Greenmire 7 loomed below, a mottled green and black sphere, angry storm systems churning across its surface. In less than 10 minutes, he would descend into that hell. Contestants, prepare for deployment, Jimmy's voice echoed through the chamber. Drop sequence initiating in T-9 minutes. Alex checked his survival pack one final time. A basic knife, water filter, sleeping roll, and emergency beacon, standard issue, but woefully inadequate for what awaited him. He looked across the bay to where Zoran stood, already dressed in his adaptive camouflage suit, surrounded by top-tier equipment. First time? A voice came from beside him. Alex turned to see a slim, feline-like woman with dark fur, a Cathara. Is it that obvious? He managed a weak smile. Painfully, she adjusted her own pack. Rhea Tran, Level 5. You're the Earth rookie. Alex Carter, he nodded. Any advice? Rhea glanced at him, then at the planet below. Don't die immediately. It would reflect poorly on both our species. Before Alex could respond, the drop sequence began. One by one, Pods launched toward the swamp planet. Through the comm system, he heard the landing assignments. Zoran Zark, Drop Zone Omega, the Meyer Dead Zone. Of course, Alex thought. The champion gets the most dangerous and resource-rich territory. More names and zones passed until finally, Alex Carter, Drop Zone Epsilon, Southern Marsh Periphery. His pod jerked violently as it disengaged, hurtling toward Greenmire 7. Through the small viewport, Alex watched the green planet grow larger, filling his vision until nothing else existed. The pod shuddered as it hit the atmosphere, heat shields glowing red. Zoran's pod sliced cleanly through the upper atmosphere, its trajectory perfect. Inside, the champion methodically checked his equipment, face betraying no emotion. On his wrist display, he pulled up the contestant manifest, scrolling until he found Alex's profile. Level 1, he muttered with a dismissive flick. Won't even need to hunt this one. The swamp will claim him before nightfall. The distance between their landing zones was considerable, but Zoran had already decided the human would be his first target. Not because Alex posed any threat, but because eliminating a level 1 on the first day would send a message to the others. The champion planned his hunts methodically, like a game of chess where every piece was both predator and prey. Alex's landing was far less elegant. His pod hit a storm current, veering off course. Warning lights flashed red as the navigation system struggled to compensate. He gripped the harness, knuckles white, as the pod spun wildly before crashing through the canopy of swamp trees. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs. For several moments, he hung suspended in the harness, disoriented. When his vision cleared, Alex saw only green-black ooze through the cracked viewport. His pod had landed half-submerged in thick swamp mud. Contestant Alex Carter. Jimmy's voice came through the emergency channel. Landing deviation recorded. Current position, southwestern deep marsh. Survival probability reduced by 27%. Thanks for the encouragement, Alex muttered, reaching for the emergency release. The hatch opened with a wet hiss, releasing a cloud of foul-smelling vapor. Alex immediately gagged, fumbling for his filtration mask. The air was breathable but barely, heavy with methane and trace acids that burned his throat. He pulled himself out onto the pod's exterior, surveying his surroundings. In every direction stretched an endless expanse of bubbling marsh, punctuated by twisted trees that resembled Earth's mangroves, but with phosphorescent purple veins running through their bark. The sky above was a sickly yellow-green, dark clouds churning with intermittent flashes of lightning. As Alex contemplated his next move, the pod shifted beneath him. The marsh was slowly swallowing it, pulling it deeper into the muck. He had minutes, not hours, to salvage what he could. Quickly, he retrieved his pack and as many emergency supplies as he could grab. As he worked, the reality of his situation sank in. He was alone on a death planet, with minimal supplies, competing against seasoned killers. The odds weren't just against him, they were laughing in his face. In the Meyer Dead Zone, Zoran's pod had landed with surgical precision on a relatively solid patch of ground. Within minutes, he had established a base camp, camouflaged his position, and begun cataloging the surrounding resources. Through his enhanced visor, he detected movement in the distant marsh, large creatures swimming beneath the surface. Moskinser, he identified, noting their acid-secreting exoskeletons. Useful. With practiced efficiency, Zoran assembled a trap using components from his pack. By nightfall, he had captured one of the massive insectoid creatures, carefully extracting its acid glands for weapon preparation. The beast's carapace would provide additional armor, and its flesh, though toxic to most species, was a delicacy to the Zor. As he processed his kill, Zoran's thoughts turned to the other contestants. His wrist display showed 99 signals scattered across the planet, most clustered in the safer zones. But a few, the more experienced hunters, had landed in the danger areas like himself. His eyes lingered on one signal in particular, Alex Carter, blinking weakly at the edge of the deep marsh. The human was still alive, surprisingly. Zoran calculated the distance between them, 3 days' travel through the worst of the swamp. He would begin tracking at first light. Alex's first night on Greenmire 7 was a nightmare. He had managed to drag himself to a slightly elevated area where gnarled tree roots formed a semi-solid platform above the muck. Every sound in the darkness sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. The distant howls of unseen creatures, the constant bubbling of the marsh, and worst of all, the occasional scream that echoed across the swamp when another contestant met their end. By dawn, 3 signals had already disappeared from the competition. Alex hadn't slept more than minutes at a time, his hand constantly on his knife. His situation was dire. The water filter worked, but finding water that wasn't contaminated with acid or parasites proved challenging. Food was non-existent unless he risked eating the local flora, which glowed ominously in the dim light. "What the hell was I thinking?" he muttered, massaging his temples. The headache from dehydration was building, and his stomach cramped painfully. As the sickly sunlight strengthened, Alex forced himself to move. Staying in one place meant death. He needed to find higher ground, clean water, and possibly other contestants, not to fight, but to form alliances. Lone wolves didn't survive in environments like this. He chose a direction that seemed to lead to denser tree growth, hoping it indicated firmer ground. Each step was treacherous. What looked solid often gave way to sucking mud that pulled at his boots. Twice, he nearly lost his footwear to the hungry marsh. By midday, disaster struck. A patch of what appeared to be solid ground collapsed beneath him, plunging Alex into a sinkhole of black, tar-like mud. He thrashed wildly, feeling himself being pulled under. The more he struggled, the faster he sank. "Help!" he shouted, knowing no one would hear, but unable to stop the primal cry for assistance. The mud reached his chest, then his neck. In desperation, Alex remembered his water filter, a metal tube with a ceramic element. He yanked it from his pack just as his arms began to disappear into the muck. With his last strength, he extended the tube above his head as the mud closed over his face. Through the tube, he could breathe, barely. Complete darkness surrounded him, pressure squeezing his chest. Alex forced himself to remain calm, to think. The mud was dense but not solid. If he could create enough space around himself. He worked his knife free from his belt, using minute movements to carve a pocket of space around his face. Then, with painstaking effort, he began to dig upward along the breathing tube. It took nearly an hour of claustrophobic terror before his hand broke the surface. Another hour passed before he could pull his head and shoulders free. Exhausted and coated in black sludge, Alex lay at the edge of the sinkhole, gulping the foul air that now seemed sweet in comparison to his buried nightmare. His pack was gone, sacrificed to the swamp. All that remained was his knife, the mangled water filter, and the clothes on his back. "Day 1, he wheezed. "Off to a great start." At the Earth Research Outpost, the commentators watched Alex's struggle with morbid fascination. "Impressive improvisation with the breathing tube," Emid noted. "But he's lost his supplies. Survival probability now below 10%. "I'm adjusting my bet," Lodaro announced. 3 days, not 5. "Wait," Hylai pointed to another screen. "Look who's moving toward the human sector." The tracking map showed Zoran's signal, deliberately making its way southwest. "The champion's going hunting," Lodaro said with a grim smile. "Poor rookie won't even see it coming." As dusk approached on his first day, Alex stumbled upon a hollow space beneath the massive roots of a swamp tree. It wasn't ideal, but it provided shelter from the acid rain that had begun to fall, hissing as it hit the marsh water. He huddled in the cramped space, shivering despite the humid heat. A noise outside his shelter froze him mid-breath. Something was moving through the swamp, too deliberate to be an animal. Alex gripped his knife, preparing for confrontation. A figure slipped into view. Humanoid, but clearly not human. In the dim light, he recognized the dark fur of a Cathera, the same woman from the dropship. "Rhea," he whispered. She whirled, claws extended, before recognizing him. "The Earth Rookie," she hissed. "Still alive, surprisingly." "Barely," Alex admitted. Rhea assessed him with critical eyes. "You look half dead already." "Feel it too. Lost my pack in a sinkhole." She seemed to debate with herself before sighing. "I have extra water. Not much, but enough to share." Alex accepted the offered canteen gratefully. The water was lukewarm and had a metallic taste, but it was the most delicious thing he'd ever drunk. "Why help me?" he asked between careful sips. "Because surviving alone is nearly impossible here," she replied, settling at the opposite side of the hollow. "I've been tracking game paths, but the local predators are too dangerous to tackle solo." "You're proposing an alliance." "Temporary," she emphasized, "until we find better shelter and resources." Alex knew she was right. His chances alone were nearly zero. Together, they at least had a fighting chance. "Deal," he said, offering his hand. Rhea examined it, then clasped it briefly with her furred one. "First light, we move. There's a network of hollow reeds to the east. They channel fresh water from the higher ground." That night, they took turns keeping watch. When it was Alex's turn, he studied Rhea while she slept. The Cathara was clearly more experienced than him, but her ribs showed through her fur, and a recent wound on her arm had been hastily bandaged. She was struggling too, despite her level 5 classification. For the first time since landing, Alex felt a flicker of hope, not just for survival, but for proving something. That classification levels weren't everything, that a level 1 human could adapt and overcome just as well as the so-called elites. Dawn of the second day brought new challenges. Rhea led Alex through treacherous terrain toward the reed beds she'd mentioned. Along the way, they encountered their first Moskinser, a horse-sized insectoid that erupted from the swamp, mandibles dripping with caustic saliva. "Don't move," Rhea whispered as the creature's antennae swept the air, searching for them. Alex froze, watching in horror as the monster's segmented body tensed, preparing to charge. At the last possible moment, Rhea pulled him sideways into a tangle of roots. The Moskinser crashed past them, its carapace scraping bark from the trees. "They hunt by movement and heat," she explained once the creature had passed. "Stay still. They lose interest." By midday, they reached the reed network, massive tube-like plants that rose 20 meters high, channeling water from the highlands down to the swamp basin. Inside the hollow reeds, the ground was relatively dry, and the water that trickled down the inner walls was clean enough to drink without filtering. "We can follow these all the way to the highlands," Rhea explained. "Better hunting there, fewer predators." "And other contestants?" Alex asked. "Undoubtedly, but most will stay in the lowlands where resources are more abundant." "Most, but not all," Alex reminded her. "The real predators will go where the prey is easiest." Rhea nodded grimly. "Which is why we keep moving." For the next 3 days, they established a routine: travel by day through the reed network, hunt and gather during dusk, find secure shelter by nightfall. Rhea taught Alex to identify edible fungi that grew on the reed walls, and how to set simple snares for the small rodent-like creatures that inhabited the tubes. On the 5th day, they encountered their first sign of other contestants: a crude camp abandoned in haste. Supplies scattered, blood stained the ground, already being consumed by the swamp's microbes. Zor, Rhea identified, examining the remains of a shelter. From the markings, I'd say it was Zoran. Alex felt his blood run cold. "The champion was here? How recently?" Rhea sniffed the air. "Within the last day. He's hunting." They salvaged what they could: a spare knife, some waterproof cord, and most valuable of all, a small medkit. The discovery both encouraged and terrified Alex. Resources were vital, but knowing Zorn was nearby meant constant danger. That night, they made camp higher in the reed system than usual, using the cord to secure themselves to the inner walls where they could sleep without fear of falling. As they shared a meager meal of roasted tubers and marsh rat, Alex asked the question that had been bothering him. "Why did you enter the games? You don't seem like the glory hunting type." Rhea was silent for a long moment. "My village on Cathera Prime was destroyed in a flooding season. The game's prize would allow me to rebuild it, provide for those who survived." "Noble cause," Alex said sincerely. "And you, Earthman? What brings a level 1 to the deadliest competition in the galaxy?" Alex stared into the small fire they'd built. "To prove something, I guess. That humans aren't just technologically advanced, but physically capable too. That we belong among the stars, not just as scientists and diplomats, but as equals in all aspects." "A philosophical warrior," Rhea observed with a hint of amusement. "Rare among your kind." "What about the others?" Alex asked. "The level 100s like Zoran?" Rhea's expression darkened. "Zoran doesn't compete for money or glory. He hunts because it's his nature. 3 seasons he's dominated, each time becoming more efficient, more ruthless. He enjoys the kill." "Then we'd better not give him the satisfaction," Alex said, though the confidence in his voice didn't reach his eyes. By the 7th day, they had climbed halfway up the reed system. The swamp below was now a distant, green-black expanse, punctuated by the massive trunks of the reeds stretching toward the acid clouds above. The air was cleaner here, the water fresher. That afternoon, disaster nearly struck again. While searching for food in a side chamber of the reed system, Alex disturbed a colony of flying creatures resembling dragonflies with razor-edged wings. The swarm emerged in a furious cloud, forcing him to flee. In his haste, Alex took a wrong turn, ending up in an unfamiliar section of reeds, lost and separated from Rhea. He navigated the labyrinthine passages, calling softly for his ally while remaining alert for predators or other contestants. Instead, he found something unexpected, a makeshift laboratory of sorts, nestled in a wide chamber where several reeds intersected. Various plants and fungi were laid out in careful arrangements, some being distilled in crude apparatus, fashioned from reed segments. "Don't move," a voice commanded from behind him. Alex froze, raising his hands slowly. "Not looking for trouble. Yet, you found it," the voice replied. A figure stepped into view, humanoid, but with greenish-gray skin and elongated fingers. "Human, level 1, the stranger identified. "Far from your drop zone. I got separated from my ally. I'm just trying to find my way back." The stranger considered this, then gestured to the laboratory setup. "I am Grant Singh, level 20, Vodar. This is my research station." "Research in the middle of a death game?" Grant's lipless mouth formed what might have been a smile. "The swamp contains compounds unknown to science, medicinal properties, antidotes to the local toxins, knowledge that could save lives, including our own." Alex studied the voter with new interest. "You're a scientist." "A healer," Grant corrected. "The games provide access to environments normally restricted to researchers. I compete to learn, not to kill." Before Alex could respond, a familiar figure dropped from an overhead passage. Rhea, claws extended, ready to attack Grant. "Wait," Alex intervened. "He's not hostile. He's a healer." Rhea hesitated, then retracted her claws, though her posture remained defensive. "The Vodar have a reputation for self-preservation above all else." "A stereotype," Grant replied calmly, "though not entirely inaccurate. I propose an arrangement, shelter and medical knowledge in exchange for protection and hunting assistance." Alex glanced at Rhea, who gave a subtle nod. "Agreed," he told Grant. But we keep moving upward. Zoran is in the lower reed systems. Grant's elongated fingers twitched at the name. The champion. Yes, distance would be prudent. I have detected signs of his hunts. 3 contestants eliminated in the past 2 days. Then we move at first light, Rhea decided. Higher ground, away from his hunting grounds. That night, in the relative safety of Grant's research chamber, Alex examined the contest map on Grant's salvage datapad. 20 contestants had already been eliminated, their signals gone from the display. Zoran's signal pulsed strongly near the base of the reed system, too close for comfort. He's methodical, Grant observed, mixing a poultice for Rhea's infected arm wound. Clearing the lower elevations first, driving the remaining contestants upward, where they'll be concentrated. Easier to hunt. Hurting us, Alex realized, like cattle to slaughter. Precisely, Grant confirmed. Which is why we must change the dynamic. The toxic mire caverns might offer sanctuary. Rhea hissed in alarm. The caverns are death traps, poisonous gas, unstable terrain, and therefore avoided by most, Grant pointed out, including, perhaps, our champion hunter. Alex considered the options. Continuing upward meant eventually confronting not just Zoran, but other high-level contestants who would have claimed the prime territories. The caverns represented a dangerous gamble, possible death from natural hazards versus certain death from Zoran's hunt. We'll need breathing protection, he decided finally, and a way to detect gas pockets before we walk into them. Grant gestured to his collection of distilled compounds. I can create rudimentary filters from these fungi. They absorb the worst toxins, if prepared correctly. And I can scout ahead, Rhea added. My sense of smell can detect gas concentrations before they reach lethal levels. As they prepared for sleep, Alex found himself staring at the map again, particularly at Zoran's signal. The champion hadn't moved in hours, which meant he was either resting or laying traps. Either way, dawn would bring renewed hunting. We're forming a real team, he remarked to no one in particular. Level 1, Level 5, Level 20. The underdogs. Probability of survival remains low, Grant noted clinically. But together, marginally improved. I'll take marginally improved over certain death, Alex replied with a grim smile. At the E7 research outpost, the commentary team watched the alliance forming with growing interest. Fascinating development, Emmett observed. Cross-species cooperation rarely lasts this long in the games. It won't last, Lodaro predicted. The moment resources grow scarce or danger increases, they'll turn on each other. It's inevitable. Perhaps, Haile interjected. But the human has survived a week already, far longer than any of us predicted. There's something to be said for adaptation over raw experience. Speaking of experience, Lodaro pointed to another screen. Our champion appears to be on the move again. Indeed. Zoran's signal had begun a deliberate ascent through the reed system, following the path Alex's group had taken earlier. The hunt continued. The 8th day brought new challenges as Alex, Rhea, and Grant abandoned the relative safety of the reed system for the treacherous, toxic mire caverns. The entrance was a gaping wound in the swamp floor, releasing visible fumes that distorted the air above it. Grant distributed his handcrafted breathing filters, masks made from reed fibers impregnated with the spores of gas-absorbing fungi. The contraptions looked primitive but functioned surprisingly well, filtering out the worst of the toxic elements while allowing oxygen through. These will last approximately 6 hours before the spores saturate, Grant explained. We must find a secure location to replace them before then. Rhea led the descent, her night-adapted eyes piercing the gloom more effectively than the others. The cavern walls glistened with moisture, reflecting the bioluminescent fungi that grew in patches, providing eerie blue-green illumination. The first chamber was vast, with a relatively solid floor of compressed sediment. Pools of bubbling liquid dotted the landscape, releasing the noxious fumes that necessitated their masks. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like fangs, occasionally dripping caustic fluid that hissed when it struck the ground. "Charming place," Alex muttered through his mask. "The toxicity levels actually decrease deeper in," Grant assured them. "These surface pools are the most dangerous." They navigated carefully around the pools, heading toward a tunnel that led deeper into the cavern system. As they walked, Alex noticed something disturbing: footprints in the sediment, not belonging to any of them. "We're not alone," he whispered, pointing. Rhea examined the tracks. "Zor," she confirmed. "Recent, within hours." "Zoran?" Alex asked, feeling his pulse quicken. "No," Grant interjected, studying the pattern. "The stride length is shorter. Another Zor contestant, lower level most likely." The revelation brought both relief and new tension. Not Zoran, but still a potential threat. They proceeded with greater caution, Rhea constantly testing the air for signs of life beyond the ambient fauna. Deeper in the cavern, they discovered what Grant had predicted: a series of chambers with notably cleaner air, where underground springs provided fresh water that hadn't been contaminated by the swamp above. Bioluminescent fungi grew in abundance, creating enough light to see without artificial assistance. "We can establish a base here," Grant decided. "Defensible, with access to water and air." "What about food?" Rhea questioned. "Those," Grant pointed to pale, eyeless creatures resembling fish that swam in the underground pools. "High protein, minimal toxins if prepared correctly." They set about creating a camp, using skills each had developed. Rhea fashioned crude but effective fishing spears from reed segments they'd carried down. Grant established a laboratory space where he could continue his work with the native fungi. Alex, having the least specialized skills, took responsibility for security, setting alarm systems with stringed pebbles at tunnel entrances and establishing escape routes should they need to flee quickly. As they worked, Alex's thoughts returned to Zoran. The champion would eventually track them here. It was inevitable. The question was whether they could prepare sufficiently before that confrontation occurred. "We need weapons," he announced as they gathered around a small fire of dried fungi. "Real weapons, not just survival tools." "The caves provide limited materials," Grant observed. "But we have knowledge," Alex countered. "Grant, your chemical compounds, could any serve as weapons? Irritants, smoke screens, anything to disorient an attacker?" The Vodar considered this. Several fungi produce spores that cause temporary blindness or disorientation. With proper preparation, yes, they could be weaponized. "And I can set traps," Rhea added. "Trip lines, pitfalls, early warning systems." Alex nodded. "We fortify this position, create fallback points, and prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." "A sound strategy," Grant agreed. "Though statistically, our chances against a level 100 remain minimal." "Statistics don't account for innovation and desperation," Alex replied, with more confidence than he felt. "We just need to survive long enough for Zoran to become someone else's problem." For the next 3 days, they transformed their cavern sanctuary into a defendable position. Grant created a stockpile of chemical deterrents, pouches of spores that, when broken, released clouds of disorienting particles. Rhea established a network of alarm systems throughout the nearby tunnels, ensuring no one could approach undetected. Alex mapped escape routes and created weapons from cave materials: sharpened stalactites mounted on reed shafts to form spears, slings made from flexible fungi stems. On the 12th day, one of Rhea's alarms triggered, pebbles clattering against reed sections in a distant tunnel. They immediately doused their fire and took defensive positions, weapons ready. The intruder moved cautiously, but not silently enough to evade Rhea's sensitive hearing. "Single individual," she whispered, limping, injured. When the figure finally appeared at the chamber entrance, they saw not the dreaded Zoran, but another Zor, younger, smaller, and clearly wounded. Blood leaked from a gash in his side, and his breathing came in labored gasps. "Help!" he managed before collapsing. Despite the risk, Grant immediately went to the fallen contestant. "Acid burn to the torso, puncture wound to the lower abdomen. He's dying without intervention." "Could be a trap," Rhea warned, scanning the tunnels. "No signs of pursuit," Alex noted, checking the alarms. "And Zoran wouldn't need such tactics. He'd come straight for us." They brought the injured Zor into their camp. Grant worked frantically to stabilize him, applying poultices and administering distilled compounds to counteract the acid eating through the alien's flesh. By nightfall, the Zor was conscious enough to speak. "Zadron." He identified himself weakly. "Level 35. Ambushed by the champion near the Reed bases." "Zoran," Alex confirmed. "You escaped him?" Zadron's lipless mouth formed a grimace. "Not escaped. Released. He let me live to send a message." "What message?" Rhea demanded. "That he knows about your alliance. That he's coming. That nowhere in the caves will hide you." Zadron's eyes fixed on Alex. "Especially you, human. He mentioned you specifically." The revelation sent ice through Alex's veins. Zoran was hunting him personally, using another contestant as a psychological weapon. The champion was playing with them. "How long ago?" Grant asked. 2 days, Zadron replied. "He's methodical, checking every passage, leaving no escape route uncovered." Alex paced the chamber, mind racing. "We need to move, now. If he released you 2 days ago, he could already be in the outer caverns." "My injuries," Zadron began. "We'll help you as much as we can," Alex decided. "But we're not staying here to die." They gathered their essential supplies and weapons, helping Zadron to his feet. Grant provided the injured Zor with a dose of stimulant fungi to keep him mobile despite his wounds. As they prepared to abandon their sanctuary, Alex studied the cavern map they'd been creating. Deeper, he determined. The honeycomb chambers at the lowest level. More hiding places. More options if we need to split up. Rhea looked skeptical. "The deeper chambers flood periodically. We could be trapped." "Better than being hunted down in a dead end," Alex countered. "Besides, Zoran will expect us to head upward, toward the surface. Going deeper is counterintuitive. And therefore potentially effective," Grant acknowledged. "The logic is sound." They moved quickly, but cautiously through the winding tunnels, descending steadily. The air grew warmer, heavier with moisture. Bioluminescent fungi became more prevalent, casting everything in an ethereal blue glow. Occasionally, they passed evidence of previous contestants, abandoned supplies, bloodstains, once even a complete skeleton picked clean by cave scavengers. By the 15th day, they had reached the honeycomb chambers, a vast network of interconnected spaces carved by ancient water flows. Here, underground rivers had created a maze of passages, some barely large enough to crawl through, others expanding into cathedral-like vaults with ceilings lost in darkness. "We establish a mobile base," Alex decided. "Never sleep in the same chamber twice. Keep supplies cached in multiple locations. Maintain at least 3 escape routes at all times." Zadron, who had grown stronger under Grant's care, nodded approval. "Guerrilla tactics against a superior hunter. It might work." "For how long?" Rhea questioned. "We can't hide forever." "We don't need forever," Alex reminded her. "Just long enough for other contestants to become more appealing targets. Or for the Game Masters to throw in a new challenge that occupies everyone's attention." As if in response to his words, Jimmy's AI voice suddenly echoed through the cavern system, transmitted to all remaining contestants. "Attention, survivors! Day 16, and still 43 of you remain. Too many for our viewers' taste. Therefore, in 24 hours, Phase 1 of the acid storm will commence. All lowland areas will experience total submersion. Upland areas will face acid rainfall of unprecedented concentration, Prepare accordingly." The announcement brought stunned silence to their group. "The reed systems will be completely flooded," Grant realized. "Anyone still there will drown or be dissolved." "And the surface will become uninhabitable," Rhea added. "Acid rain strong enough to eat through protective gear." "Which leaves the caves," Alex concluded. "Where we already are, along with who knows how many other contestants about to flee here." "Including Zoran," Zadron reminded them grimly. The next hours were a frantic preparation for the coming storm and the inevitable influx of desperate contestants. They consolidated their supplies, reinforced their weapons, and selected a defensible chamber with multiple escape routes. Grant worked tirelessly to create more chemical deterrents, while Rhea established new alarm systems covering all approaching tunnels. Alex found himself staring at the cavern wall, where moisture trickled down from the surface. Soon, that moisture would turn corrosive, carrying the acid rain into the cave system. Nowhere would be truly safe. "We should split up," Zadran suggested, as they finalized preparations. "4 targets are harder to hunt than one group." "Strength in numbers," Alex countered. "Alone, none of us stands a chance against Zoran or the higher-level contestants who will be seeking shelter." "The human is right," Grant supported. "Our survival probability is highest as a unit, despite the increased visibility." Rhea, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly tensed. "Someone's coming. Multiple someones." They doused their light and took defensive positions, weapons ready. Minutes later, they heard it, the sound of multiple contestants moving rapidly through the tunnels, fleeing the coming storm. The first to appear was a serpentine being with luminous scales, a Setarinon, barely larger than a child but moving with incredible speed. Behind came 2 Aquir, amphibious humanoids with webbed hands and feet, followed by a massive Morvac, its reptilian bulk barely squeezing through the tunnel. All were armed, all looked desperate. None had noticed Alex's group yet, hidden in a side chamber. "What do we do?" Zadran whispered. Alex assessed the situation. The newcomers were clearly seeking shelter, not hunting. Fighting them would waste resources and create noise that might attract real predators. But allowing them to pass meant potentially having hostile contestants at their backs. "We make contact," he decided, carefully. Before anyone could object, Alex stepped partially into view, keeping his weapon ready, but not aimed directly at the newcomers. "Looking for shelter from the storm," he called. The reaction was instantaneous. The Setarinon vanished into a crack in the wall, moving too fast to track. The Aquir raised weapons, crude spears fashioned from cave materials. The Morvac let out a rumbling growl, its massive fists clenching. "We have no quarrel with you," Alex continued, keeping his voice steady. "The caves are big enough for all of us to survive the acid storm." "Why should we trust you?" one of the Aquir demanded, her voice melodic despite the hostile tone. "Because fighting benefits no one except those hunting us," Alex replied. "We're all prey here. The real predators are still coming." The Morvac's growl subsided slightly. "The champion hunts the upper caves already. Many dead." This confirmation of Zoran's proximity sent a chill through Alex. "All the more reason to avoid conflict among ourselves. We propose a temporary truce, separate territories, non-aggression until the storm passes." The newcomers conferred briefly. The Setarinon reappeared, whispering something to the Aquir. Finally, the female Aquir stepped forward. "I am Nira, level 55. We accept your terms. Human. Separate territories. No aggression while the storm rages." Alex introduced his group, and boundaries were quickly established. The newcomers would take the western chambers, Alex's group the eastern. The central waterway would be neutral ground for gathering resources. Any violation of territory would void the truce instantly. As the newcomers departed to establish their camp, Rhea pulled Alex aside. "That was incredibly risky. They could have killed you instantly." "But they didn't," Alex pointed out. Because they're smart enough to recognize that infighting only serves the true hunters. We need allies, Rhea, even temporary ones. The human shows wisdom beyond his level, Zadran observed. Such alliances were common in earlier games, before contestants became so kill-focused. Necessity drives cooperation, Grant added. The storm will force many such arrangements, temporarily altering the competition dynamics. They spent the remainder of the day fortifying their position and preparing for the acid storm. Grant created sealed containers for their water supply, protecting it from contamination. Rhea reinforced their shelter with layers of fungi that could absorb and neutralize the acid that would inevitably seep through the cave ceiling. As they worked, Jimmy's voice echoed through the caves again with hourly countdowns to the storm. The AI's cheerful tone contrasted grotesquely with the deadly consequences he described: projected casualty rates, acid concentration levels, estimated survival times for unprotected exposure. They're turning up the difficulty because too many are surviving, Zadran explained. It happens every season when the elimination rate slows. How many survived last season? Alex asked. 7, Zadran replied grimly. Out of 100. The 20th day dawned. Though in the depths of the caves, dawn meant nothing except Jimmy's announcement that the acid storm had begun. Almost immediately, they could hear it, a distant roaring as torrential rain lashed the surface, followed by the hiss of acid eating through soil and vegetation. Within hours, the cave ceiling began to weep corrosive droplets that sizzled when they struck the ground. Grant's fungal reinforcements worked better than expected, absorbing most of the acid before it could reach them. Still, they had to relocate twice when particularly heavy seepage threatened their position. The neutral waterway turned cloudy as acid contaminated it, rendering it temporarily unusable for drinking. Throughout the day, they heard distant screams echoing through the cave system as contestants less prepared or less fortunate succumbed to the acid or to opportunistic hunters taking advantage of the chaos. Each scream was followed by the computerized chime indicating another elimination. By nightfall, or what their chronometers indicated was nightfall, the remaining contestant count had dropped from 43 to 28. The storm had claimed 15 lives in a single day, making it the deadliest event of the games thus far. In their chamber, huddled around a small heat source, Alex and his allies listened to the constant drip of acid and the occasional distant scream. None spoke much, each lost in private thoughts of survival and what the coming days might bring. Alex found himself staring at Zadran, who had recovered enough to take his turn at watch duty. The Zor had been sent as a psychological weapon against them, yet had integrated into their group seamlessly. Was it genuine cooperation, or was Zadran playing a longer game? The same question applied to all of them, even Rhea and Grant, allies from necessity rather than choice. When would the breaking point come? What would force them to turn on each other, as the games inevitably demanded? Alex pushed these thoughts away. One crisis at a time. Survive the acid storm first. Worry about betrayal later. The acid storm continued for 3 relentless days. Their relative safety in the deep caves came at a price: complete isolation from the surface and dwindling supplies. The neutral waterway remained contaminated, forcing all groups to ration their stored water carefully. On the 23rd day, disaster struck. A section of ceiling collapsed in their chamber, bringing a cascade of acid-laden debris down upon them. They fled with what supplies they could grab, Zadran narrowly escaping being crushed by falling rocks. Their new shelter was less defensible, closer to the neutral waterway and the territory of Nira's group. Tensions rose as resource competition increased. Twice, minor skirmishes broke out over access to the few remaining clean water seeps. By the 24th day, Jimmy announced that the acid storm was abating, but its effects would linger for days. The surface transformed into a caustic wasteland, where even the most resilient vegetation had been reduced to skeletal remains. We need to scout the upper caverns, Alex decided. Assess the damage. Look for new resources. Check for threats. I'll go, Rhea volunteered. I move quickest. Make least noise. Not alone, Alex insisted. We use the buddy system from now on. I'll come with you. Despite objections from Grant and Zadran, Alex and Rhea set out for the upper caves. The journey was treacherous. Passages had collapsed. Pools of concentrated acid blocked familiar routes, and the air grew increasingly toxic as they ascended. In what had once been the mid-level caverns, they found evidence of recent conflict. Bloodstains, broken weapons, a partial footprint that Rhea identified as belonging to a Morvac, possibly the one from Naira's group. Recent fighting, she whispered. Within hours. They proceeded with greater caution, using side passages and crawl spaces to avoid detection. As they approached the upper caverns, they began to hear voices, distant at first, then clearer. Someone was arguing. Creeping forward, they positioned themselves where they could observe without being seen. In a large chamber ahead, illuminated by bioluminescent fungi, stood Nira and her Setarinan ally, facing off against a towering figure that made Alex's blood run cold. Zoran Zark, the champion, had survived the acid storm. His adaptive camouflage suit was scored with acid burns, but he appeared otherwise unharmed. At his feet lay the massive form of the Morvac, clearly dead, a precision wound visible at the base of its skull. This territory is claimed, Zoran was saying, his voice cold and precise. Depart or join your companion. Naira stood her ground, trident raised. We survived the storm. We earned our place here. You survived because I allowed it, Zoran corrected her. Just as I allowed certain others to believe they had hidden successfully. His gaze shifted slightly, looking directly at the passage where Alex and Rhea were concealed. Isn't that right? Human. Alex felt his heart stop. Somehow, impossibly, Zoran had known they were there all along. The champion hadn't been hunting blindly. He'd been herding them, tracking them, playing with them like prey. Run! Rhea hissed, already backing away. But it was too late. In a blur of movement, Zoran activated something on his wrist. A section of ceiling above them exploded inward, showering them with debris and acid droplets. Alex felt searing pain as the caustic liquid splashed his arm, eating through his sleeve to the skin beneath. Rhea pulled him back as more debris fell, blocking their retreat. They were trapped between a collapsed passage and Zoran. The level 1 human who thinks he can outplay a champion. Zoran addressed Alex directly, ignoring the others. I've been waiting for this moment since the games began. Naira used the distraction to attack, her trident thrust aimed at Zoran's exposed side. The champion moved with impossible speed, catching the weapon and using its momentum to throw Naira against the cavern wall. The Aquir crumpled, momentarily stunned. The Setarinan vanished into the shadows, abandoning its ally. Wise move, Alex thought grimly. Your allies desert you, Zoran observed. As all allies eventually do in the games. Not all, came a voice from behind the champion. Grant and Zadran emerged from a side passage, weapons ready. They had followed despite Alex's instructions, anticipating trouble. Zoran seemed amused rather than concerned by their arrival. The collection grows, 4 against 1. Do you believe that improves your odds, human? Maybe not, Alex admitted, trying to ignore the burning pain in his arm. But it's not about odds. It's about principles. We work together because it's right, not just expedient. Noble sentiments, Zoran mocked. Useless in a death game. He attacked without further warning, moving faster than Alex's eyes could track. Grant went down first, a precision strike to his throat, leaving him gasping. Zadran managed to land a glancing blow before being thrown across the chamber. Rhea leapt at Zoran from behind, her claws seeking vulnerable points in his armor. She succeeded in tearing through one section, drawing blood, before the champion seized her by the throat and slammed her to the ground. Alex watched in horror as his allies fell one by one. He knew he stood no chance in direct combat against the level 100 champion. But perhaps direct combat wasn't the answer. As Zoran advanced on him, Alex backed toward the acid pool that had formed beneath a leaking section of ceiling. The champion followed, confident in his superiority. No clever strategy, human. No inspirational speech about the power of cooperation. Just one question, Alex replied, continuing to back away. Did you check what's above you? Zoran's eyes flickered upward involuntarily, just long enough for Alex to lunge forward, tackling the champion with all his strength. The unexpected move caught Zoran off balance, sending both of them staggering toward the acid pool. At the last moment, Alex twisted, using Zoran's weight against him. The champion teetered at the edge of the pool, arms windmilling. Alex delivered a final desperate shove, and Zoran fell backward into the concentrated acid. The scream that followed would haunt Alex's nightmares forever. Zoran thrashed in the caustic liquid, his camouflage suit dissolving, then his outer skin, then deeper. The acid worked with horrifying efficiency, reducing the champion to an unrecognizable mass in moments. When the thrashing stopped, a computerized chime echoed through the caves, followed by Jimmy's excited voice. Elimination confirmed! Level 100 champion Zoran Zark has been defeated by Level 1 Alex Carter. Unprecedented upset in the history of the Deathworld games. Alex stood frozen at the edge of the acid pool, unable to process what had just happened. He had defeated the champion, the unstoppable hunter who had dominated 3 seasons of the games, not through superior skill or strength, but through desperation and circumstance. Slowly, painfully, his allies recovered. Grant tended to Rhea's injuries while Zadran helped Naira to her feet. The Setarinan reappeared, looking sheepish at its earlier desertion. You killed him, Naira said, disbelief evident in her voice. You actually killed Zoran Zark? We killed him, Alex corrected. Together. None of us would have survived alone. Jimmy's voice interrupted again. Attention, survivors! With the elimination of our reigning champion, we enter a new phase of the games. 24 hours of mandatory non-combat recovery time begins now. Use this period to treat injuries and prepare for the final challenge. The announcement brought mixed reactions. Relief at the temporary reprieve from hunting, concern about what the final challenge might entail, and uncertainty about the alliances that had formed during the crisis. What happens now? Zadran asked, addressing the unspoken question. The truce was until the storm ended. I propose we extend it, Alex suggested. At least until we learn what the final challenge involves. To his surprise, Nira nodded agreement. The human has proven his worth. My group will honor the alliance until the final challenge begins. The next day was spent in recovery and preparation. Grant's medical skills were in high demand, as everyone nursed injuries from the acid storm and the battle with Zoran. Alex's arm required extensive treatment, where the acid had burned through several layers of skin. As they tended their wounds, Jimmy provided regular updates on the state of the games. Only 17 contestants remained alive out of the original 100. The surface had been rendered uninhabitable by the acid storm, forcing all survivors into the cave system. The final challenge would require the remaining contestants to navigate to a specific extraction point, where only the first 3 to arrive would proceed to the ultimate championship round. The Fusion Inferno, Jimmy announced with typical showmanship. In 48 hours, magma chambers beneath Greenmire 7 will activate, flooding the lower cave systems with lava. Contestants must ascend through the caves to reach the surface extraction zone. May the best survivors win. The announcement changed everything. Their sanctuary in the deep caves would soon become a death trap. The ascent would force them through collapsing passages, acid-weakened structures, and most dangerously, past other desperate contestants, all fighting for the same limited extraction spots. This changes our agreement, Naira stated flatly. Only 3 can advance. Our alliance cannot hold. It can until we reach the upper levels, Alex countered. None of us will survive the ascent alone. The passages are compromised, the acid damage extensive. We need each other to navigate safely. After heated debate, a compromise was reached. Their groups would ascend together, helping each other through the dangerous lower and mid-level caves. Once they reached the upper levels, where the extraction zone would be visible, all alliances would dissolve. Each contestant would then compete individually for the 3 advancement spots. The ascent began on the 28th day. The deep caves were already growing noticeably warmer as the magma chambers below began to activate. In places, the rock floor was hot enough to burn through footwear, forcing them to create improvised insulation from fungi and cave moss. Progress was painstakingly slow. Many passages had collapsed completely during the acid storm, requiring detours through unfamiliar and treacherous territories. Twice they encountered other contestants, desperate, injured survivors seeking any advantage. Both encounters ended in violence, though Alex's group suffered no casualties. By the 30th day, they had reached the mid-level caves. The air was thick with toxic fumes rising from below, necessitating constant use of Grant's fungal filter masks. The heat had become nearly unbearable, causing hallucinations in some of the less heat-resistant species. They rested in what had once been their original sanctuary, now barely recognizable after the acid damage. As they prepared for the final push to the upper caves, Alex found himself seated beside Naira, the Aquir, who had once been a potential enemy. "Why did you enter the games?" he asked her, echoing the question he had posed to Rhea weeks earlier. Naira's webbed fingers traced patterns in the cave dust. "Honor among my people. Participating in the games brings prestige to one's entire lineage. Victory means generations of elevated status. Worth dying for? We all die eventually," she replied philosophically. "Few deaths have meaning. This one would win or lose." Alex considered this. "And now, after all that's happened?" Naira studied him with large, reflective eyes. "Now I question whether individual glory matters as much as what we've accomplished together. Your level 1 classification means nothing compared to what you've demonstrated here." Before Alex could respond, a distant rumbling shook the cave. Small stones cascaded from the ceiling as the entire structure vibrated. "The magma chambers are activating early," Grant announced, checking his instruments. "We must move immediately." Their orderly ascent became a desperate scramble. Heat pushed upward through the cave system, like a living entity, seeking prey. In places, the rock floor had begun to glow dull red, forcing them to leap from safe spot to safe spot. As they reached the upper caves, the alliance began to fray. The Setarinan, smallest and fastest of them, darted ahead without warning. Zadran hesitated, torn between group loyalty and self-preservation, before finally following Alex's lead. On the 31st day, they emerged onto the surface of Greenmire 7, or what remained of it. The acid storm had transformed the swamp into a nightmarish landscape of skeletal trees and bubbling chemical pools. The air was barely breathable, heavy with acrid fumes. In the distance, perhaps 5 kilometers across the devastated terrain, stood a glowing structure, the extraction zone. Between them and safety lay a hellscape of natural and game master-created obstacles. Jimmy's voice boomed across the wasteland. "Welcome, final contestants. Before you lies the gauntlet of Inferno. First 3 to reach the extraction zone advance to the championship. Begin." The race was brutal. Acid pools had to be circumvented, unstable ground tested before each step, and worst of all, gouts of flame erupted randomly from fissures in the earth as the magma rose closer to the surface. Their group fragmented almost immediately. The Setarinan vanished in a blur of speed. Nira used her amphibious nature to advantage, swimming through less caustic pools to gain distance. Grant moved with surprising speed for his species, his knowledge of the terrain proving valuable. Alex found himself running alongside Rhea and Zadrin, the three of them navigating the hellscape together despite the competition. They had survived too much as a team to abandon each other now, even with advancement at stake. Halfway to the extraction zone, disaster struck. A massive geyser of flame erupted directly in their path, cutting Zadrin off from Alex and Rhea. When the flames subsided, they saw the Zor on the ground, badly burned and struggling to rise. Without hesitation, Alex and Rhea turned back, running to Zadrin's aid. "Leave me," he gasped. "You'll lose your chance." "No one gets left behind," Alex insisted, helping Zadrin to his feet. "Not after everything we've survived." Together, they half-carried Zadrin across the wasteland, losing precious time but refusing to abandon their ally. Ahead, they could see other contestants already approaching the extraction zone. The Setarinan had nearly reached it, with Naira close behind. Grant was visible in the middle distance, moving steadily. With a kilometer remaining, Zadrin's strength gave out completely. He collapsed, unable to continue despite their support. "Go," he urged them. "One of you can still make it." Rhea looked at Alex, her expression conflicted. "He's right, we're out of time." Alex glanced at the extraction zone, then back at Zadrin. "Get him to safety," he told Rhea. "I'll make a run for it." Before she could object, Alex sprinted forward, pushing his body beyond its limits. His lungs burned from the toxic air. His legs screamed with exhaustion, but he ran as he had never run before. Ahead, he saw the Setarinan reach the extraction zone, disappearing inside in a flash of light. Nira followed moments later. One spot remained. Grant was closer, only a few hundred meters from the goal. Victory should have been assured for him. But as Alex watched, the Vodar stopped, turned, and looked back. For a moment, their eyes met across the wasteland. Then Grant deliberately stepped aside, gesturing toward the extraction zone. Alex understood immediately. Grant was conceding his spot, acknowledging everything Alex had sacrificed and accomplished. It was a gesture of respect from a higher-level contestant to a level 1 human who had proven himself beyond any classification. With the last of his strength, Alex crossed the threshold of the extraction zone. Light enveloped him, and the hellscape of Greenmire 7 vanished. He materialized in a pristine chamber aboard the Apex Arena. Jimmy's avatar waited, along with the Setarinan and Naira, both looking exhausted but triumphant. "Congratulations, finalists," Jimmy announced. "You have survived the Deathworld Games and earned your place in the championship round." Alex looked around, disoriented. "What about the others? Rhea, Zadrin, Grant?" "All surviving contestants have been extracted," Jimmy assured him. "Those not advancing to the finals receive medical treatment and runner-up compensation, as per game protocols." Relief flooded through Alex. His allies had survived. Against all odds, their makeshift team had beaten the Deathworld. The championship round was anticlimactic compared to what they had endured. A series of skill challenges, archery with acid-tipped arrows, navigation through a simulated toxic maze, identification of poisonous and beneficial flora. Naira ultimately claimed first place, her natural abilities giving her an edge in the controlled environment. Alex finished second, higher than any level 1 contestant in the history of the games. The Setarinan took third, its speed advantage less decisive in the final challenges. At the awards ceremony, broadcast across the galaxy, Jimmy invited Alex to the center stage. Level 1 Alex Carter. The AI announced to billions of viewers. "You have defied every prediction, overcome impossible odds, and eliminated the reigning champion. The games have never seen your like before. What message do you have for those watching?" Alex looked out at the virtual audience, thinking of everything he had experienced. The terror, the pain, the desperation, but also the cooperation, the trust, the bonds formed in the face of death. "Classification levels don't define us," he said finally. "What matters is adaptation, innovation, and most importantly, cooperation, alone. None of us would have survived. Together, we thrived. Remember that the next time you underestimate someone based on their level or their species. The response was thunderous applause across 1,000 worlds. At the Earth Research Outpost E7, the commentary team watched in stunned silence. "I've never seen anything like it," Hailey admitted. "A level 1 reaching the finals, eliminating Zoran." "Humans continue to surprise us," Lodaro acknowledged grudgingly. "I lost a fortune betting against him." Imid nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps we need to reconsider our classification system. This level 1 showed the will of a level 100. In the aftermath, Alex was offered automatic advancement to level 50 and a guaranteed spot in the next season of the games. To everyone's surprise, he declined. "I entered to prove something," he explained to Naira as they prepared to return to their respective worlds. "I've done that. Now, I want to use what I've learned to help others survive, not to compete again." Naira clasped his hand in her webbed one. "You've changed the games, human. Nothing will be the same after what you accomplished." "What we accomplished," Alex corrected her. "None of us would be here alone." As his transport prepared to depart for Earth, Alex looked back at Greenmire 7, now a distant green-black sphere against the stars. The nightmare swamp had nearly killed him countless times, had pushed him beyond all limits, had shown him both the worst and best of what intelligent beings could do when survival was at stake. He had entered a level 1 Deathworlder with something to prove. He was returning a champion who had learned that the most important survival skill wasn't strength or experience or technology. It was the willingness to reach across species lines, to trust, to cooperate in the face of overwhelming odds. That lesson, he decided, was worth all the suffering Greenmire 7 had inflicted, and it was a lesson the galaxy desperately needed to learn.